Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Krampus. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe and all that good stuff. Um, Common question I see on my various product pages on DriveThruRPG tends to relate about wanting to know a bit more about the rule system before being willing to pull the trigger, like Alec Baldwin on buying one of my games. So, I'm gonna just give like a brief rundown here of the gist of it. Part of my design philosophy is that the rules of a role-playing game should always relate to what's actually on the player's character sheet. You should try to avoid having too much stuff that's entirely divorced from things going on the character sheet, because the character sheet is the entire interface for the player to be able to interact with the imaginary environment that the role-playing game creates. um, it's a real simple, stripped down White Wolf Light with some different dice mechanics. It only uses 3d6. You have 3 attribute scores: body, mind, and spirit. Uh, they're used for actions that the character takes. Kind of varies depending on the situation. There's a lot of personal discretion for both the players and the game master running the game as to like which attribute is applicable for what the character or the player wants their character to do. But for typical human characters, they range between 1 and 3. When you get all the way up to like high levels, this game does have a level of experience thing. It only goes up to level 5 though. But when you get up to like level 4 or 5, you start to be able to like push your limitations on how high your attributes can go and how high your skill bonuses can go a little bit at the topmost levels. So it is possible to have an attribute of 4, but for the most of your character's adventuring career and most standard human characters, you'll either have a 1, 2, or 3 as your attribute score. 1 indicates that the attribute is weak, 2 means that the attribute is average, and 3 would indicate that the attribute is considered strong, but still within, human limitations. An attribute of 4 or more is typically, like best of the best kind of people, and or, someone who's somehow supernaturally enhanced and ancient kind of a thing. Um, Derived from your 3 attribute scores, you have 3 different kinds of status. Each is its own kind of hit point. From body, you get health, fairly self-explanatory. It's typically going to be 2 plus whatever your attribute score is, so you're not going to have a tremendous amount of pool, and unless you get to a high enough level that you get some attribute points to play with, it's not going to go up unless you actually beef up that attribute score somehow. Um, but it just tracks, your basic character's physical integrity. Uh, if you have like basically every health level of 3 or more is considered optimal, as long as you're within the optimal range. Even if you've taken a little bit of damage, your character still operates with that attribute that's associated with that status fine. Um, but as you get down to when you got 2 of that status level, your character's hurt and starts to take like a little -1, modifier to their rolls. It gets down to only 1 status level left. It's now wounded, and you're getting massive penalties, and if it happens to be for the health status, your speed's going to be knocked in half when your character's taking a move action. And if your status is zeroed out, that status becomes incapacitated. You can no longer use the attribute score for rolls. You can only basically do super easy tasks if you have a really high amount of a skill bonus going on there that you can automatically exceed what the base difficulty is for an easy type skill, but that's about all you'd be able to do. And so you want to try to avoid becoming incapacitated, and uh, incapacitated is 0. And taking more damage after the character becomes incapacitated is the point where you're basically now at risk of permanent loss of the character. With health, that would mean you're already knocked out and you're bleeding, and then someone comes and hits you, strikes you, shoots you again, like Alec Baldwin, and then your character dies. Roll up a new character. Now, with the other 2 statuses, sanity, which is derived from your mind, and morale, which is derived from your spirit, your character might not technically die if they're taken down to incapacitated and then take more of that kind of damage. If it's for your sanity, the character just goes insane. It's possible to recover them, but the recovery time is like tripled after the character's like been pushed beyond incapacitated into what I guess we're going to call critical damage. And so, like, convincing the rest of your player group to sit around and wait for up to 3 years while your character goes through intense psychotherapy that they have to be restrained for a good chunk for, just because, you know, like, they've snapped. It's not just, you know, you're having, like, some mental problems. It's to indicate that the character's gone completely over the edge. Similarly, morale, which is derived from spirit. You get that down to incapacitated and take more morale damage, the character basically just entirely just gives up. They submit to whatever the situation is. Whoever it was that broke their will kind of has complete control over them temporarily. And once again, it'll take way, way, way longer than what is reasonable for other players or even you to be able to continue with the adventure that's going on, to wait the length of time it would take to rebuild that character's self-esteem and decondition them from whatever brainwashing or whatever it was, hypnosis. There's a lot of different ways attacks work in this game because of having this 3-tiered status. You know, damage is no longer just, you know, a gun shooting you like Alec Baldwin and doing some health damage. Now, you know, like, verbal attacks are a thing. Albeit, you know, your characters do have to have a certain amount of the appropriate skill and a good enough mind or spirit attribute score to be able to pull off, like, a successful verbal attack that will actually, like, degrade someone's morale or sanity. It's supposed to be easy, but it is possible, and hopefully it adds, like, a level of tension back into dialogue-driven scenes that has not been there and that a lot of people complain about, and as to why combat seems more dynamic, because combat has this tension of loss of health. Since you have to worry about your character's mental health and their emotional health, that kind of expands the kinds of situations that, you know, that kind of attention can be grabbed onto to create an enjoyable gaming experience. So the way attribute scores work is whatever that number is, 1, 2, or 3, that's how many dice 6 you get to roll for the character's action. It's a classic thing, you want to roll higher than whatever the difficulty is. There's generic difficulties, or the game master can set a specific number based on what they feel the situation warrants. The generics are easy, would be roll higher than a 3. That way even someone with a die 6 still has a 50-50 chance of being able to be successful at something that's easy. Average is 6, hard is 10, very hard is 14, and something that's considered impossible is 18, although with high enough attribute score and with good skills, the impossible can be done by some characters, which is, you know, storytelling kind of shit. So after you get your attribute scores selected, all of them always start off at 1. For player characters, you're not going to have less than 1. So you get 1 in each for free, and then you get 3 additional points to add to that, and you're not allowed to raise any of them above 3 at the very beginning. Which means basically, you know, you can either level everything out, put a point in each attribute, and that way you're just average at everything, or you could lean into making yourself peak up to being strong in one attribute, but that means one of your other 2 attributes is going to be weak. You only have enough points to have 1 average attribute, so it'll be kind of a 1, 2, 3 or 2, 2, 2 is basically kind of like your options. But where you want to lean that 3 peak, if that's what you want to do with your character, is up to you. There's a way, especially with the skills, that you can have a very jack of all trades kind of character, or you can very much customize and lean in to things. But because you have that balance between 3 different kinds of hit points you got to worry about, you know, the incentive to just make raging combat monsters is a little bit lessened by the fact that, like, you know, someone could just taunt you into losing your character anyway, no matter how ripped and great they are with a sword. So it provides, in that way, hopefully, some sort of sense of balance, so that, you know, people can still make the kind of characters they want, but, like, now it doesn't give them necessarily a super advantage over someone who wanted to play a more dialogue-driven, character concept-y kind of stuff. Skills are bonuses, basically, that you add to your dice roll for actions. Say, you know, you're trying to lift a door, so you have a couple points in your strength skill. Let's say you got a strength of +2. You would roll, and a body of 2. So you'd roll 2 dice 6, get the result from that, and then add the 2 from your 2 points of strength skill
and then that gives you the final result to check to see if you got it higher than whatever the stated difficulty was. And as of now, I have 5 different categories of standard skills that characters can choose from. Each skill category has 3 skills associated with it. There's the direct skills that tee off of the body, mind, and spirit. There's also skills for combat, and what was the other one? Oh, strange skills, which are named. They're kind of like, they're not average people. There's stuff that you like educated people have to have, so they're called strange. There's also a selection of special skills that aren't always going to be available in every game line, and not all characters are necessarily going to be able to take them all. Most of them are like your magical kind of things, basically. There's a psionics category, divine magic, infernal magic, and recently starting to introduce the concept of martial skills. They run differently. Those are like permanent bonuses that you get to add to your character's combat statistics. If you take the strike skill, you get to add that strike bonus to all attacks on top of whatever specific bonus you might have for a specific kind of attack skill. If you have points in parry, your character gets to add that to their defense difficulty for people who are trying to hit them with melee attacks. And dodge is the same, but for ranged attacks. Most human characters are built on about 15 skill points at starting level. Generally, like 10 points is kind of like free to do with as you wish, and then you can break things down into like categories to kind of create a sense of the character's origins and or skills by, they'll have some sort of class stand-in that'll have an associated skill category that they get some more points that they put specifically into that category alone. And then after that, after you got your skills all figured out, which, like I said, they start at 0, so like a character can attempt most skills unless it's a special skill, just using their attribute alone. But obviously having the bonus improves your odds, especially if you have like a lower amount of dice in your pool. But once you get all that figured out, then you can set your character's limits. This is stuff like figuring out your character's encumbrance and their movement rates for both like short-range combat situations and their movement rate for overland travel if they're trying to walk a long distance, and to see how long it takes before they start to have to, make a strength roll to make sure they don't start to fatigue and need rest. And that's basically it. It's fairly customizable. It's really easy to write up NPCs, and hopefully this explains, for those of you who are curious, exactly what the rule system is. Like I said, you'll just need a handful of die 6. It's like character creation is like super breezy and super customizable. So check out any number of my games and stay waspinated.